In today's episode, we'll discuss the legendary Kennywood hypercoaster that was formerly hated and despised by many. Welcome to Airtime Traveler. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Roller Coaster History Podcast. You are listening to Airtime Traveler. My name is Nathan Grace, and I'm joined by my wife and lovely co-host.
Hi, I'm Haley Grace.
And welcome, everybody, to episode 4. Thank you so much for tuning in. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to our first 3 episodes, we've already done Powder Keg at Silver Dollar City, and we did Wildcat at Hershey Park. We did Seven Dwarfs Mine Train from Walt Disney World.
Favorite.
Yeah, we did Disney World last week, so That was exciting.
Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. So.
Yeah, and it's been a lot of fun. We've had a lot of fun doing this podcast for you guys so far. So be sure to follow us on Spotify or even on Twitter and Instagram so that you can keep up on every episode and always be notified when a new one comes out.
Yeah,
so.
Absolutely. We're not only going to be talking about the history of roller coasters, but we might have a bonus episode here and there for things that we might go and actually do at the park or what we thought of the park. So definitely hit that follow button to make sure and follow along to hear some fun things about some roller coasters.
Yeah, it's exciting. The week that this podcast episode comes out, we will be on a trip where we're going to Kings Dominion and Kings Island for the first time. So we'll be doing some trip reports on those, the experiences that we had at those parks at some point. So be sure to stick around for those, and it'll be exciting. So if this is your first time joining us for the podcast, we take every episode, we take one roller coaster and we dive into the history of that individual coaster. I am a roller coaster enthusiast and have been for a long time and really enjoy these rides and getting to know the history and the facts behind them, while my wife Haley is a member of the GP, or the general public. So she doesn't know the coasters as well as I do, but she enjoys going on them, and she's learning more and more every episode. So
it's true. And it's kind of nice because you save all the information that you usually share in the park for the podcast now. So
are you saying that when we go to the parks we'll actually have to be able to have normal conversations now, or or we'll talk about the food instead, or
either or,
we'll see.
Yeah, it's true.
Or maybe I'll just repeat everything like I have, let's just say everything.
That's also true.
We'll see how it goes.
I appreciate the facts. I don't know, I love them, and I love listening to how excited you get, and as a general public member, I get excited, but not nearly as excited as you. So
yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be interesting to see how these trips go in the next few weeks. So I'm excited.
Me too.
So I think I was telling you earlier that I sent a tweet over to Kings Island to see if the Beast would be open when we go for our trip. And I said something to the effect of I sure hope it's open for coaster stock. That would be a bummer if it wasn't open in time for that event. And they tweeted earlier today that it will be open. And actually, it's opening tomorrow.
No.
So they tweeted today that it's opening
perfect.
Tomorrow. So yeah, so it'll be open when we go, which is
that's
exciting. So
we'll definitely have to talk about that when we get back for sure.
Yeah. So. Well, we're not talking about either of those parks today. Today we're going to be talking about Kennywood, which is Haley's home park, and a park we have been to together fairly recently. I guess it was a couple years ago. But we had a really good time. It was a good trip. It was right when the pandemic was kind of full swing, and so we had to wear masks the whole day, but the park was absolutely dead.
Yes.
We almost walked onto everything all day.
Yeah.
The only downside of it is when we were there, Steel Curtain wasn't open, so we still haven't gotten to ride that one. But everything else we got to ride that day, and I think we left by 2 or 3 in the afternoon because we had rode everything that we wanted to.
Yeah, even more than once. So
yeah, we had ridden. I think I rode Phantom's Revenge twice, and everything else we did at least once. I think we may have done Racer twice as well. So anyway, it was a fun day.
It was a
lot of
fun day.
So I want to let you, since this is your home park, I wanted to let you take a minute to just kind of talk about your experience with Kennywood growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. Well, for starters, Kennywood is only about 45 minutes away from my house growing up. So it was, a lot of fun being able to go, especially as a teenager. Another amusement park that's pretty close to my house is Idlewild. But they don't have a lot of roller coasters there. They have a Wild Mouse and another roller coaster called
wooden roller coaster, right?
It's called Roller Coaster. And so those are really the only two roller coasters that they have there. And so that was the park that we mainly went to, growing up as like young children.
Yeah, because Idlewild, for those of you who are not familiar, Idlewild it's actually owned by the same people that operate Kennywood, so they're under the same branch.
Exactly.
But Idlewild's geared more towards like younger kids and families, where Kennywood's more of a thrill ride park. So.
Yeah. But anyways, so I got to go a lot with more of my like school trips, and like as a teenager, I went on dates there. It was just more of like the place to kind of go and have a good time, and it was a lot of fun. And like there's obviously a lot of great memories I have on roller coasters there, like Phantom's Revenge is like one of my favorite roller coasters ever, because it's just super nostalgic for me, and obviously it's one of the best roller coasters ever. But I also have a lot of memories on like the racers and is it Skyrocket?
Skyrocket, yeah, that's the one at the front of the park.
Mm-hmm. The launch coaster. Mm-hmm. So I really liked that one too. That one was pretty new for growing up, and now it's not even like one of the newer coasters. So but it's just fun, and like they obviously have a great nostalgic feel to it. It's a pretty older park, with the Jackrabbit there. It's like over 100 years old, and so a lot of neat aspects go into the park, and obviously I love the food there. There's
potato patch
fries, and they're famous for being like some of the best fries in
the potato
world.
Patch fries would be, and I've still got a lot of parks to visit, but as of right now it's definitely top 5 amusement park food that I've ever had.
And it's fantastic. It's always slammed, like it's always so busy when you go there. So
I that's a very vivid memory I have from that trip, is just sitting at a table eating the potato patch fries, and then Thunderbolt is like right next, and it just whips right past that little eating area, and so it's fun to just sit there and eat your fries and watch people going on Thunderbolt. So
yeah, for sure.
So that was when we went on our trip, I guess that would have been in 2020.
Probably.
Yeah, because it was middle of the pandemic, and Parker was only probably 6 months old, so that would have been 2020. So it was the 100th anniversary of Jackrabbit that year, so that was cool. And that was my first time ever going to Kennywood. Obviously, Haley had been there a bunch, and the first thing we did when we got there was we got on Phantom's Revenge, which that's the roller coaster we're going to be talking about today. Which I think you've told me Phantom's Revenge is your favorite roller coaster. I think you've told me that before.
Yeah, I still would say that. So
yeah. And I had, when we went to Kennywood, it was like I was kind of like in the transitional phase from like someone who enjoys roller coasters to being like an actual enthusiast. Like I knew about the rides, but like I didn't really know a lot. Like I'd watch POV videos and stuff, but I didn't like know the history or anything.
Yeah.
And like I knew what Kennywood was, and I knew they had a couple steel coasters and a couple wooden coasters, but like I think that first ride that I had on Phantom's Revenge was like the turning point for me of becoming like just someone who enjoys roller coasters from going into a roller coaster enthusiast, because we got off that ride and I just was like, what just happened?
Like, that was a vivid memory for me. Like I remember you getting off and you're like, wait, I gotta take a video of this. Like
yeah, I was like, I had no idea how legendary that ride was, and like the records that it had broken and some of the records it still holds, and like So, getting off that ride, I was like looking at the stats and I was like, that thing was 85 miles an hour. I was like, that's crazy. I had no idea. I was just like, man, big roller coaster. Okay, cool. And then, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And like, I loved it.
Yeah.
It's not that I didn't enjoy it. It's that I loved it so much and I had no idea that I was getting into a ride that was, that was what was going to happen. So that was kind of when I was like really getting into roller coasters, when I was like, I don't know, just how much I enjoyed that ride kind of kickstarted a whole new, hobby of mine, I would say.
Yeah.
So that was it was a good trip. It was a fun trip. So I'm
Just think
excited.
about it this way: if you never met me, you would have never rode Fana,
Yeah,
and you would have
probably
never
not.
had, this podcast or
There you
even
go.
had this hobby of
There you go.
yours.
The podcast exists because of Haley. The
The
GP is
general
why
public.
the podcast exists. I mean, to be fair, without the GP, none of these amusement parks would be here, right? Like,
It's true.
the coaster enthusiasts make up a small percentage of the people that actually go to the parks. The GP is, the people they really got to please to bring in the money. So,
It's true.
but yeah, I'm excited to talk about Phantom's Revenge since that was one of the first times other than Disney was the first time we went to an amusement park together, but Kennywood was the second time that we went. So that was a fun trip.
It was a fun trip.
So
I'm glad we went.
yeah, me too. So Phantom's Revenge is certainly the most universally loved coaster we've talked about so far. So it opened in 2001, and ever since it opened, it has been in the top 15 for the Golden Ticket Awards ever since, and to this day, still in the top 15. So, even though other coasters have come and gone and they've, built bigger and faster coasters since then, there's still something to be said about, Phantom's Revenge and why it consistently stays in the top 15 in the Golden Ticket Awards. In the Coaster Bot rankings, it currently ranks number 16 in the country. So
That's
really,
pretty
it's
crazy.
really impressive. This puts it below rides such as Sky Rush at Hershey Park, X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and Millennium Force at Cedar Point. It ranks ahead of coasters such as Mako at SeaWorld Orlando, Superman the Ride at Six Flags New England, and Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City. At the park, it is easily ranked number 1. So, like I said, it's ranked number 16 in the country. Steel Curtain is number 2, it's ranked at number 82. So still top 100, but not, top 25 like Phantom's Revenge is. And then Jackrabbit, Thunderbolt in 3 and 4, Skyrocket number 5, Racer number 6, and then Exterminator number 7. So I
I'm
would
surprised Jackrabbit is that high of a ranking. So
Jackrabbit is really popular for 2 reasons, and we'll talk more about it when we do an episode on Jackrabbit. But one, I think nostalgia is a big part of it, and because it's over 100 years old and still is really it still holds its own after that long, I think people give it a lot of credit because of that. Number 2, the second half of the ride. So it's a terrain coaster. So the first half of the ride, you just kind of follow the mountain to go over a few hills and airtime moments. But then you go up a chain lift to get you to the second half of the ride. And as you come out of the chain lift, you go down a drop, and then it levels out. And instead of going up into like an airtime hill, you go down another drop, which is known as a double down. And it was the first coaster to ever do that. And so since then, other coasters have, kind of followed that same idea. There's even coasters now with triple downs, and one at Dollywood that has a quadruple down. But yeah, Jackrabbit was the first to do that. And that was my favorite part of that ride. Like the airtime you get on that double down is really fun. So when I look at my rankings, granted we didn't go on Steel Curtain, but my number 1 at the park is Phantom's Revenge. My number 2 actually is Jackrabbit.
Really?
Out of everything else we rode that day.
that's
So,
interesting.
in fact, my rankings pretty closely match what other people say. I think the only difference is I rank Racer above Skyrocket, and I've heard a lot of good things about Skyrocket lately. So I'm hoping maybe this summer we'll get a chance to go on to Kennywood. We'll see.
Did we not go on Skyrocket?
No, we did, but I was kind of underwhelmed by it. But I've heard a lot of other people over the past year say it's like I've heard other people say it's really good, and that not people don't give it enough credit. So I need to ride it again and just see if maybe something I
Maybe
missed
being
the
like
last
an
time.
enthusiast.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe an enthusiast, I'll notice some things that I didn't notice last time, or in comparison to other things that I've been on since then, maybe it'll change my mind. But we'll see. We'll see. The one thing
I really like it.
it's a fun ride. The thing is that I wish they had done is I wish the launch was like you came to a stop and then launched. It's a rolling launch, which I don't enjoy as much. But like I said, I've got to give it another try and see if I like it more. Um, so that's my ranking. So you would say Phantom's Revenge is your number one,
Absolutely.
and then from there, what does yours look like?
Probably. I'm gonna make sure I get this right. The racers. Yeah, probably the racer, Exterminator, Thunderbolt. Well, no, I probably put Skyrocket above Thunderbolt and then Jackrabbit.
So you really like Exterminator, huh?
I do like Exterminator. I like indoor dark ride roller coasters for some reason. I don't know.
So like, is it the theming that makes it for you, or is it the being in the dark and like not seeing where you're going?
Well, for theming purposes, it's definitely not the greatest. It definitely needs some updates.
Well, it's better than Phantom's Revenge that has like no theming.
Right, but like I'm just saying, like, compared to like the laugh track when we went to Hershey or Space Mountain, like it doesn't.
Disney
and I understand that, but I'm just saying, like I feel like they could do some updating on that ride. Yeah. Like I think like
they
some
built
of the
that one
animatronics could get some love.
Yeah, I don't know if they got the money for that. The coaster was built in the late '90s, and so it doesn't seem like they've updated much since then. So
I do like it though. I like Exterminator.
So all right. Well, that pretty much covers the intro today. So let's talk about the history of Phantom's Revenge. So we're going to go back to 1979. All right, 1979. So our story is actually going to start in Kennywood for a change. The past few weeks we've been starting in other places, like
different countries.
Yeah, like Disney World. We started in Denmark and then went to Australia at one point. We were all over the place. So we'll be staying. I think we'll jump over to Europe for a minute or two, but most everything is going to be in the U.S. this week, which is interesting. So, like I said, every coaster has a different story, right? That's why we do this. So
it's true.
So throughout the decades leading up to 1979, Kennywood had been adding thrill rides to the park to compete with other amusement parks in that area, because that area of the country, there's just so many amusement parks. Like, I mean, you got Cedar Point a few hours away, you got Kings Island 4 hours away, Hershey Park 4 hours away. Not to mention Knoebels and Dorney Park further away on the eastern side of Pennsylvania. So there's a lot going on in that area.
I mean, even, my marching band just went to Wildwood, so there's a lot.
Yeah, there's so many amusement parks in the area. So by 1979, it had been 20 years since they had added their last coaster. And at the time, Kennywood didn't have any steel coasters. So everything they had at that point was wooden. So at that point, they had the Racer, they had Jackrabbit, Thunderbolt, and they had another one. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it's one that's not there anymore. So they had, I think they had the 4 wooden coasters, and that was all they had at that point. So in the summer of 1979, Kennywood announced Laser Loop. Schwarzkopf, it's German, so I'm trying to say that right. Schwarzkopf, I think is how you say it. Anyway, I'm not German. Schwarzkopf Shuttle Loop Coaster. This coaster type was very popular in the industry. They had opened 6 of them from 1977 to 78. So they were like a very simple model. So this is kind of what they look like. For those of you that are following along, I'll be posting some of these pictures I'm showing Haley on our Twitter and Instagram. So if you want to follow us at Airtime Traveler on either of those social media sites, then you can see some of these pictures. So I think this one on the left here is Tidal Wave at Six Flags Great America.
Okay.
And then this one, is it King Cobra at King's Dominion? I can't remember what the name of the one at King's Dominion was, but anyway, King's Dominion had one, Six Flags Great America, and like I said, they had opened 6 of them between 77 and 78. So they're very popular. All it is you would be in the station, and it would launch out of the station. It'd go through a loop. It'd go up into this vertical spike like here, and then it would roll backwards, go backwards through the loop, back through the station, and there's another vertical spike on the other side of the station, and then it would just roll back down into the station, and that was the whole ride. So, but for this time period, like this was one of the very first launch coasters to ever be built. So, it was revolutionary for its time, and that's why it was really popular. So, there's only one of these that's still in operation in the U.S., and that is Montezuma's Revenge at Knott's Berry Farm, which I did not get to ride because they're refurbishing it right now. So, but yeah, I don't know if they're going to put a new launch system on it, like update it to modern technology standards, or if they're just repainting it and updating some of the pieces that are wearing out. I don't know. They just said refurbishment. They haven't specified what that means. But anyway, so that's the only one in North America. Well, I don't know about North America, at least in the United States, that's still operating to this day. So at this point, Kennywood decided that they were going to invest in one of these to put into their park. So the attraction called Laser Loop would go from 0 to 55 miles an hour in 3 seconds, would hit a 72-foot loop, and then into a 140-foot spike, and then, like I said, just run through the same thing backwards. The whole ride was 38 seconds long. So they announced it in 1979, opened to the public on April 19th, 1980. So, okay, this is one of the funniest things we're going to talk about tonight. I found this article that someone wrote when the ride was opened. And there's this line in here that just cracks me up, because just the audacity of the line that he puts in here. So I'm just going to read straight from this article. So I think this was some Pittsburgh newspaper that wrote about this. So it says, if you have a taste for being catapulted 54 miles an hour, whipped upside down through a 72-foot high loop, and hurled 140 feet into the air to a complete stop, lick your chops and get ready for Kennywood Park's April 19th opening. He goes on to talk about the construction of the ride. But then this is the line that just I was like, are you serious? He said, it will be the top attraction for Kennywood during its 83rd season, and park regulars will notice that it is the only new ride. I'm just like, wait a minute. Like, are there people that go to an amusement park at the beginning of the year and they're like, what? They only added one new ride over the off season? Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. Like, I got a kick out of that. Like, if you go to Disney World, like you go to Magic Kingdom, you'll get 4 or 5 years in between new rides at Magic Kingdom, which is fine. Like, some of these rides are really expensive. They take a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of development. Yeah. So I just found that hilarious. Like, how dare they only add one new ride this year? So funny. What else did he say? There will be several minor additions, such as a fresh fruit gazebo. But perhaps the biggest change will be the nickel increase in ticket prices for the park's 35 major and 14 kiddie rides. A nickel of what? It sounds like at this point, this was before Kennywood went to a park admission. The rides were, you paid per ride. Yeah, right. So I guess it was a nickel increase for every individual ride, which 1980, that may have been a big deal. So, yeah. So I just had to bring that up. It's the only new ride. How dare they? So the Laser Loop was really successful. It was really popular among the guests. It was, like I said, they didn't have a steel coaster at this point. So to add in a major steel coaster to the park was really successful, and people really enjoyed it. And it was a good investment for the park, and became the park star attraction at that point. So now we're going to fast forward 9 years, and now we're going to go to Cedar Point, so just a few hours away.
All right.
So in May of 1989, Cedar Point opens Magnum XL200. So this was built by Aerodynamics, who we talked about last week, and I don't know, we seem to talk about Aerodynamics at least a little bit every week.
Mm-hmm.
But so this was $8 million coaster built at Cedar Point, and it was the first coaster to be labeled a hyper coaster. Which, do you remember what that term means from episode 1?
No.
Okay, we'll get there. So hypercoaster is just any coaster that is over 200 feet, between 200 and 300 feet.
Yeah, I would never remember that.
So that's, yeah, so this was the first coaster to ever hit that 200-foot mark. And so it was a big deal. And it started this phenomenon known in the industry known as the Coaster Wars, which we'll talk a little bit about later, but that comes into a play with Phantom's Revenge. So anyway, this was a huge investment, broke all kinds of records, became Cedar Point's star attraction, and it's still there. So we'll get to try this one when we go to Cedar Point later this year. Cool. A lot of people still love this ride. They say the airtime that you get on it is unlike anything else. So
cool.
Should be interesting.
Yeah.
I'm excited to try it. So
it looks like fun.
Yeah, and we'll obviously when we do an episode on Magnum XL200, we'll talk more about it. So around this same time, Kennywood management had been discussing adding another major attraction because they hadn't done anything since Laser Loop 9 years previous, and because of their limited space, they were kind of struggling with a location. So one of the things Haley had talked about is the how old Kennywood is. Like, it's been there forever.
It's true.
And because it's been there forever, like, they just kind of developed all the land that they had available, and they had run out of room, and that's been an issue they've run into for many years now.
Yeah.
Kennywood actually, I don't know if you know this, but they have more coasters that have been demolished at the park than coasters that they currently have today.
Really?
So that's how many coasters, like, they've just cycled through over the 100-something odd years that they've been in operation. So on January 24th, 1990, so 8 months after this ride had opened at Cedar Point, Kennywood officially announced that they were constructing a massive new coaster for the 1991 season. And in order to do so, Laser Loop would need to be removed. So even though it is, the most popular attraction at the park, and it was their only steel coaster, the technology for steel coasters had just skyrocketed in the 1980s, and so it was seriously outclassed by modern steel coasters of that era. So so the park said that the closest ride to what they would be building was Loch Ness Monster at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, which was built by Aerodynamics. So from what it seems like and what I've heard is the Kennywood president at the time, I think his name was Harry Henninger. From what I've heard is he was really impressed with Magnum XL200, which, I mean, makes sense. They probably visited to check it out since It's only a few hours away from Kennywood. So you can just imagine like the Kennywood officials going over there to just check out the ride and being impressed with what Aerodynamics was able to do. They decided to get Aerodynamics to take on the project for the new coaster at Kennywood. So according to reports, Henninger actually designed the original rough drafts of the ride. And then Aerodynamics took his designs and turned them into a reality.
That's cool.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Often, so
I was, and the interview that I read was from Harry Henninger, so I don't know if maybe he exaggerated the truth a little bit on that, or if that's actually true. It's probably true. Like, it would be interesting though that, like, just to have this, the president of the park have this idea and just say, like,
it'd be cool to see the rough draft, like a picture.
I wish you could see that. That would be really cool to see what they had in mind. So Aerodynamics took his designs and turned them into a reality. So the coaster was going to use the terrain. So it wouldn't be as tall as Magnum XL200, but it would be faster and feature a bigger drop. So, and the
because
reason for
of the
that,
hills.
yeah. So if you haven't been to Kennywood or been on Phantom's Revenge, the ride, the second drop is bigger than the first drop because the second drop you're going down the side of a hill,
Yeah.
and so although you're only like, let's say 150, 140 feet in the air when you get to the top of the hill, as you're going down the hill, you start going down the side of the mountain, and so the drop is a lot longer. And we'll talk more about that later as we talk more about the ride. But the idea was that it was going to be a coaster that could beat some of Magnum XL 200's records. So not only that, but the coaster would feature 4 inversions, which Magnum XL 200 doesn't have any inversions. It's just all airtime. So the coaster would feature a vertical loop, a corkscrew, and a batwing, which a batwing goes upside down twice. The coaster seemed to be a blend of Aerodynamics Hyper Coaster, like Magnum XL 200, and their looping coaster, which could be like Viper at Six Flags Magic Mountain, or like I said earlier, Loch Ness Monster at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. So it seemed to be kind of a blend. Like they were going to make it big enough and tall enough to be a hyper coaster, but have inversions like their looping coaster. So it was an interesting concept that hadn't really been done by them before. When they announced the coaster, when Kennywood announced the coaster, the name of the coaster had not yet been decided, which is interesting. It's not very often anymore that you have people announce, like, hey, this is the coaster that we're building. Like, this is what it's going to do. This is how tall it's going to be. It doesn't have a name yet, though. Like, I can't think of a park that's done that recently.
Well, it was named Phantom first, wasn't it?
So we'll talk about that. That's okay.
I'm jumping ahead.
Well, that's actually what we're going to talk about right now. So you're not jumping ahead too far. So in July of 1990, the name was officially announced as Steel Phantom. That was the original name. So I found this, though, which is interesting. The name was decided from a poll conducted among employees of the park. And these are the 3 other names that were under consideration. Okay, you ready? I want to hear your opinion on these.
I'm ready.
So there's Nightmare.
Okay.
Lightning Express.
Okay.
And Excess Express.
Oh, wow.
I hate that last one. That's such a bad name.
That's a good one.
I mean, but
it's my vote.
That's what you would have voted for.
Oh.
We're going to ride Excess Express.
Could you imagine?
It's a tongue twister.
Yeah. Excess
Express. Excess Express.
Excess Express.
I don't even know what that means. Excess Express.
All right, then. So.
Anyway, Steel Phantom won the ballot in a landslide over the other 3 names.
I can see that.
Nightmare's not a terrible name.
I don't know. I think it's a great name for it because of it kind of paying tribute to Pittsburgh, being Steel City. So
yeah, I like the steel in the name is a nice touch. So
it is nice.
And I saw mentions of that throughout the interviews that was part of why they liked that name, was because it kind of was to play off of the Pittsburgh theme, So it was a good idea. So in early September, guests were given the opportunity to come ride Laser Loop one last time, which I really like when parks do this. Some parks don't, and when we talk about some of these, you'll see that there have been times where a ride just closes, and like people didn't even know it was going to close. Like they just show up for opening day, and all of a sudden, like they realize like a ride that was there last year is just gone. And so I really like when the park does things like this, and sometimes they'll even auction off tickets to come to like a final event. And then they'll donate the proceeds from that to charity or something like that, which is really cool. So
that's cool.
Yeah, I don't know if Kennywood did that. I don't know if they just like people were able to come ride it until closing day of that year or whatever. But I do know that people were aware that it was closing, so they got to go ride it one last time, which I appreciate when parks do that. So, and interestingly enough, the Laser Loop actually made headlines a few months ago, which is kind of interesting. So. And so after it was taken down, they didn't just demolish it. They actually sold it to another park.
Really?
So they sold it to, I'm going to try to pronounce this right, La Feria Chapultepec, Mexico in Mexico City. So, and it operates at that park as Cascabel 2.0 until 2019. So this is what it was. This was at the park in Mexico. So they repainted it, gave it a new name, and it operated the park until just a couple of years ago. And then it made headlines a few months ago because it had been sold to Niagara Amusement Park in Grand Island, New York, which is and this is the kind of the pictures that someone posted. So you can see it's got the same color scheme as it had when it was in Mexico.
Cool. Okay.
And the park says it's going to open later this year. So the laser loop from Kennywood is supposedly going to reopen in the United States. So remember,
it's not that far. Niagara Falls is really only like 4 hours away.
Yeah, it's not too far. So it's kind of interesting.
Cool.
It's returning back to the area that it originally started and it's still operating to this day. And like I said, there's only one of these still operating in the country, and it's out in California.
Huh.
So if this opens like they say it will, then it'll be the second one.
That's cool.
So it's pretty cool. It's an interesting piece of history, and I like it when coasters are able to continue to operate at other parks rather than just being demolished. So engineering, just an interesting fun fact that Laser Loop is still making headlines even in 2022. So after they removed Laser Loop, construction began immediately for the new attraction for Steel Phantom. And opening was planned for opening day of the park, though park officials did make it clear that that was an estimate. So they were saying, basically they said that's our goal, is to open it by opening day, but we're not confirming anything. So additionally, the park did have to remove a parking lot to make room for the ride. So this was probably, I don't know when the first time you went or the first time you remember going to the park, but I guess there used to be a parking lot on the other side of Kennywood Boulevard because now if you go, the park is on one side of Kennywood Boulevard and all the parking is on the other side. I guess there used to be a parking lot that was on the same side as the park was.
Yeah. Well, I used to park in there all the time.
Oh, so you're familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
So you used to park there this happened you were 3 when this happened. Or not, you weren't even born when this happened. Never mind. I don't know why I'm asking you to remember this. Is there still parking on that side of Kennywood Boulevard?
Parking on that side. If I'm thinking of it correctly, I'm pretty sure that there's still parking.
I thought
it's like a dirt parking lot that we parked there.
Yeah, that's still on the. We had to cross over Kennywood Boulevard to get to the park from there.
Huh. Maybe I'm not thinking the
same
wavelengths of you.
That's fine. Anyway, there used to be a parking lot that was on the other side of Kennywood Boulevard, and I guess they had to remove it to make ride for Steel Phantom. So, and so they expanded that dirt parking lot that you and I are talking about. That's on the other side from the park. They expanded that so that they still had room for people to park. In 1990 ended up being a really bad year for Kennywood as weather had significantly impacted the attendance. And there wasn't like anything there wasn't like any major natural disasters or anything. It just was like a ton of rain. It just rained so much that year that attendance was just like
but honestly,
plummeted.
Let's be honest, that sounds like Arkansas these past couple of days.
That's true. So it's like how it is here in Arkansas for the past week was like all of 1990 for Kennywood, apparently. It just was so much rain. The park chairman said it was so bad that the interview that I read was like in August or maybe July. He said even if they broke records for the rest of the year, they still wouldn't hit their attendance goals. So like that's just how bad it was. So, and this was right after they had announced this huge investment of Steel Phantom. So park officials were nervous. Like they were putting all this money into this big coaster, and at the same time the park was losing money. So they were kind of nervous, which is understandable.
Right.
They said it had been the worst year the park had since Hurricane Agnes in 1972. So it had been a long time since the park had, had this kind of struggle with attendance. So they really needed Steel Phantom to be a massive success in order to justify the $4.5 million price tag. So in April of 1991, construction has been going on for Steel Phantom, which, here's some construction pictures here. So, we'll get to that in a sec. So there you can see some construction pictures. By April, the rain and high winds had delayed the construction of the attraction, but not significantly. They only pushed it back to May 4th, 1991, where opening day was like mid-April, I think. So just a couple weeks of delay. However, they did have an iron worker that was injured while working on the coaster later in the month of April. The injuries were not the injuries were serious, but they were not fatal. So that was fortunate. That I guess they had some type of equipment issue. That some equipment. I guess one of these baskets or cages they were using malfunctioned and it didn't stop when it was supposed to. So he got rattled around or whatever as the thing was dropping to the ground. So, but like I said, the injuries were serious but not fatal, which was fortunate. So
That's good.
As May 4th approached, the opening was pushed back just by a week to allow for final details to be completed. So they said it would open May 10th. However, May 8th, May 8th, park employees were the first to ride Steel Phantom. So they started letting the employees at the park preview it, test it out. And finally, on May 10th, 1991, Steel Phantom officially opened to the public. And here's some pictures of it here. So that's what it looked like back when it was Steel Phantom.
Nice.
Okay. So this was the ride experience. So riders would board 28 passenger trains in rows of 2, 4 passengers per car. The train left the station and made a small turn to the right before ascending the 160-foot lift hill. After ascending the lift hill, the ride went down a bank drop to the right, back to ground level. After a section of straight track, the train ascended a large hill as it turned to the right. The train then dropped a record-breaking 225 feet down the side of a large hill, passing through Thunderbolt's support structure, hitting its record-breaking top speed of 80 miles an hour. After a massive bank turn to the left, the train started back up the hill before entering a vertical loop. After the vertical loop, the train immediately hit the Batwing and then took a right turn before hitting the corkscrew. As the train exits the corkscrew, the train followed a banked helix to the right and then hit a small airtime moment before hitting the final brakes. So during opening weekend, there were many guests that complained of excessive headbanging and neck strain during the ride's 4 inversions. So guests were really enjoying the first 2 big drops. But then as they got into the final half of the ride, there was a lot of complaints of injuries and stuff like that. So
okay, I'm seeing where
the
connection is now.
Yeah, just 3 days after the ride opened, the park closed it down to investigate. So that is crazy to me. To all this hype of this massive, huge investment. To put this in terms of Cosmic Rewind at Disney, right? So if Cosmic Rewind, I don't remember what day, it opens later this month. Let's call it we'll just say the 28th.
No, it was open.
No, I don't think so. I don't think it opens officially. People are getting previews of the ride right now, but I don't think it's open yet. So let's call it the 28th. So if it opens May 28th, what if they closed it May 31st because they were having issues with the ride?
Crazy.
That would be insane. And people having trips booked already to go try it. And they just get to the park and it's just closed.
Yeah.
Brand new ride. It's crazy. So 3 days after the ride, the park closes the ride to investigate, and engineers discovered that the coaster was going faster than it was supposed to during the final 4 inversions.
Whoa.
That's not, terrifying. Isn't that scary? Not good. So, like I said, the coaster was immediately closed. And it was closed for 2 weeks to make adjustments to the ride to bring it to what it was supposed to be, basically. So Aerodynamics brought in a team, and over the 2 weeks, they installed some trim brakes before the vertical loop. So the first half of the ride would be the same speed, but as it came into the inversions, it would slow the train down, and then it would finish the course going through the inversions. So following the installment of the brakes, the ride did reopen. So it was only closed for 2.5 weeks.
That's good.
Guests reported that the neck strain issue had been eliminated, but the headbanging remained a significant problem. Apparently, it was so bad that guests were asked to remove earrings before getting on the ride.
Whoa.
Because it had over-the-head restraints. Oh. And so it didn't want people...
I really like the restraints now.
Well, actually, you can see it in the picture here. So they just had over-the-head restraints, and they would tell you to take your earrings off so that
oh my
if your head was banging back and forth, you wouldn't jab your earrings into the side of your head.
Stab your neck.
Yeah, so that's crazy. So I found a few reviews on Reddit of people that did get the chance to ride Steel Phantom before. Well, we'll talk about what happens to Steel Phantom, but so these were some of the reviews I saw, which was interesting. Someone said the trims into the first loop were very strong. It felt like it slowed the train from 65 miles per hour to about 35, 40 miles per hour. So it seemed like the trim brakes were like pretty strong. Like you could feel pretty obvious how much the train was slowing. Someone else said, I rode it a few times the year it opened, and the loops and inversions were downright torture. And then the last review, I found this one funny, said it was a fun novelty that wore off quickly. People loved the first two drops, but just didn't have an interest in riding it over and over again because the inversions were just too intense. The fact you had to remove earrings says a lot. My grandfather lost his hearing aid on the ride. I thought that was really fun.
Poor grandpa.
I know, isn't that so sad?
Oh no.
That's so sad.
I shouldn't laugh. That's terrible.
That's so sad.
Oh no.
So, one of the things that's interesting, something we talk about in the enthusiast community, is if you're an enthusiast and you're familiar with certain ride types or certain models or certain restraints, enthusiasts know how to ride specific roller coasters. So I'll give you an example. There's, so I'll just use Steel Phantom as the example. If you had if you had ridden Steel Phantom a few times, you know where the inversions were and where they were coming. And if you're familiar with aerodynamics and how their coasters ride, then if you're an enthusiast, you could kind of prepare yourself for the inversions and kind of like prevent the head banging by, being aware. And so that's something we talk about as enthusiasts, is you can be a defensive coaster rider, which is not a good thing, but it is something that enthusiasts are aware of for some of these rides that are kind of rough, especially if something like this is still open, like Viper at Magic Mountain or Loch Ness Monster at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Those ones, like, people can still ride them even though they've gotten kind of rough. Enthusiasts still enjoy them because they know how to ride them. Problem is, general public doesn't know that. And the general public,
I don't know that.
Yeah, you would have no idea. And so for the general public coming and riding this, which is most of the people riding it,
right,
they just get on and assume it's going to be a smooth coaster, and then they just get slammed around the whole time. So it's not good. So it's, the enthusiasts may enjoy it because they know how to ride it, but the general public's going to get on it one time, hate it, and then never ride it again.
Right.
So it was rough. So, in fact, it was so bad that in October of 1991, Kennywood and Aerodynamics were sued by a mother and daughter who rode the ride on opening weekend. Remember, before they installed the trim brakes and it was going faster than it was supposed to. So the mother claimed that she had torn a ligament in her knee while riding the coaster, which I have no idea how you tear it. It's very strange.
Yeah.
Knee is a weird thing.
It's a weird spot to tear a ligament on a roller coaster.
Yeah, like if it was an inverted coaster, maybe, but like when you're sitting down, I don't know. But in December, another woman sued claiming she had a herniated disc from her ride of the same weekend before they installed those trim brakes. Yeah, so that one makes more sense.
Yeah,
but
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Knee.
I tried to find more information on the.
Grandpa didn't sue about
his hearing aid. I guess that fall under loose articles, right? They just say
maybe
you're responsible for anything you drop when you're on the ride.
Take out your hearing aids, Grandpa.
Can you imagine if you got up to a ride and like on the thing it said like please remove all hearing aids? Like, that's crazy. So. I tried to find more information about the cases to see if they went to court or anything. I couldn't find a thing. So they either were dismissed or settled out of court. I'm not sure. But regardless, the interesting that they were sued by two people that went to the roller coaster that weekend is interesting. That's
interesting. Well, I'm glad that they closed it and tried to at least fix it a little bit.
Yeah. So despite the negative response, the ride remained fairly popular due to its record-breaking stats. And like I said, it was popular among the enthusiasts. And so it even scored 11th best steel coaster in the Golden Ticket Awards when it was founded in 1998. So
So even with all those complaints, it was still 11th best.
isn't that interesting? So like the GP didn't enjoy it because it was such a so rough, but if you're an enthusiast that knew how to ride it, like you enjoyed it, and it was a record breaking
Okay.
coaster. So that's why the enthusiasts are ranking it 11th in these Golden Ticket Awards, while the general public's not riding it anymore. It's
Interesting.
interesting.
That
It's
is
it's
interesting.
something that like as members of the GP, you don't even think about it. You're just like, oh, that's a bad coaster. But it's something that enthusiasts will talk about. Like a ride has to be exciting for the enthusiast, but it also has to be enjoyable for the GP. If one of those two is not true, then well, even if it's not exciting for enthusiasts, if it's fun for the GP, it'll probably stay at the park. The GP makes a bigger difference than the enthusiasts do. So
They bring in more money, like you said.
exactly. So here's just a couple more pictures of the ride, just so you can kind of see. So here are the four inversions. This is kind of after you were
Okay.
looking at it from the station.
Mm-hmm.
This is it going through the corkscrew there, and then you could kind of see how it was laid out. So here's the Pittsburgh plunge right here,
Okay.
and then there's this path that like comes around. I'm not sure if this path is still there. It probably is, but you could see like the hill starts over here and it goes down into the valley, and then this is where the Batwing was. Here it's like, so you could get like great pictures from the path right there of the Batwing as it came by,
Hmm.
and then it would jump through the corkscrew and back into the station over there.
Okay. Cool.
So this was the advertisement that they sent out
Oh,
after
I
it
love
opened.
that.
Isn't that cool? I like that, the design, and the world's biggest, fastest roller coaster. And now I bring this up because we're going, and like I find this interesting. Kennywood, the roller coaster capital of the world.
Uh,
Do you know who else calls themselves that?
isn't it
Cedar
Cedar
Point.
Point? Yeah, I
Cedar
was gonna
Point.
say
So this really feels like
the coaster war thing that you're
exactly.
talking
So let's
about.
talk about Coaster Wars. So this is a phenomenon that we talk about in the industry where starting with Magnum XL 200 in 1989 all the way through 2005, it was just this constant record breaking of like, we have the biggest coaster, we have the biggest coaster,
Huh.
we have the fastest. So you can see it starts in 1989 with Magnum XL 200, was the tallest and fastest coaster in the world. And then Steel Phantom opens 2 years later as the fastest, wasn't the tallest, but it had the largest drop. And then in 94, Pepsi Max Big One opens in Blackpool Pleasure Beach in England as the tallest. And then July of 96, Fujiyama, so like opens as tallest and fastest. So this record gets broken in 96, twice in 97, gets broken again in 2000, again in 2000, again in 2000. Like people just
Yeah.
constantly one up, just we gotta have the
You
biggest,
got to
the
be better.
fastest, we
Yep.
gotta be better. And then finally, so we started in 1989, was the first coaster to hit 200 feet. It took like 50 years for us to get to 100 feet to 200 feet. By 2003, we got to 400 feet.
Wow.
So it only took 14 years to go from 200 feet to 400 feet
Yeah.
during this period of the Coaster Wars. And then finally, in May of 2005, Six Flags builds King to Ka, which is still the tallest and second fastest coaster in the world today. And
Huh.
then it's just kind of stopped. Like that was kind of like the end. Like I guess people were just like, okay, this is getting out of hand.
Yeah.
Like we're spending way too much money on these rides, and like it kind of got to this point where it was like people weren't as impressed with these rides as they should have been. So it was kind of like this: we need better quality instead of better numbers, if that makes sense.
Right.
So that's why Cedar Point ends up opening Maverick in 2007, I think, which Maverick is only like 100 something odd feet tall, but people consistently rank it in the top 10 coasters in the world because it's just a really fun launch coaster. So I'm excited too.
I'm really excited for that one, actually.
So this is, we're going to get to that in a second. So that's the Coaster Wars. That goes on because of Steel Phantom and Magnum XL 200 kind of button heads.
Yeah.
That's kind of what kickstarts the Coaster Wars, which is kind of fascinating. So
yeah.
So as we go throughout the 90s, Phantom's Revenge loses its records because of Pepsi Max Big One, Fujiyama. These other coasters grab all of its records. So it's no longer the biggest and fastest like they were claiming it was. So, and it's becoming more rough and painful. So Kennywood ultimately made the decision to replace Steel Phantom. So on March 5th, 2000, park officials announced that Steel Phantom would be dismantled following the 2000 season. Which again, I appreciate that they said like, hey, this is the last year the ride's going to be at the park.
So get on now.
So yeah, I like this trend that I'm seeing with Kennywood, like letting people have their last chance to come ride things before they change it.
I hope they continue to do that.
Yeah, Kennywood's been pretty good about that. I know that they got a lot of heat when they removed the kangaroo. Is that what it's called?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but because they got so much heat,
they opened it back.
Yeah, they brought it back. So Kennywood's been pretty good about listening to its guests and doing what they want. And actually, we'll talk about in a second, but when they announced that they were going to remove Steel Phantom, there was a lot of people that were really upset about that. Like, so I read that some guests were happy to see the painful coaster go, but there were still a lot of enthusiasts and a lot of guests that really enjoyed it, and the park was receiving hundreds of emails and complaints about the ride's removal. So the park kind of made this decision that rather than completely removing the ride, maybe let's just alter it and refurbish it.
Which is what they did.
Exactly. So on August 10th, so later that year, Kennywood announced that Steel Phantom would be converted into Phantom's Revenge for the 2001 season. Essentially, Phantom's Revenge would be an attempt to keep the best parts of Steel Phantom and remove the worst parts. So the coaster's first and second drop would remain almost identical, while the inversions on the second half would be completely removed and replaced with airtime hills. Aerodynamics was experiencing financial issues at this point, so rather than bring them back in to redo the coaster, they hired D.H. Morgan, which we haven't talked about D.H. Morgan yet. They're kind of a smaller company, but they've done some fairly significant coasters. So at Worlds of Fun, they did Mamba, which we haven't had a chance to ride yet, but won't get to this summer.
Yeah.
That's a hyper coaster up at Worlds of Fun. And before this project, they had just opened, what was it, Steel Dragon? Yeah, Steel Dragon, which actually Steel Dragon 2000, I think is what it's called, because it was open in 2000. Steel Dragon 2000, which is
where's this at?
This is at Nagashima Spa Land in Japan.
Okay.
So
that's an interesting coaster,
right? Look at how many airtime hills that is. This coaster, when it opened, was the tallest, longest, and fastest coaster in the world at that time.
I really like how those little airtime hills are like built inside of the big airtime hills.
Right? Isn't that cool? So this ride really takes a lot of inspiration from Magnum XL 200, because this is kind of how Magnum XL 200 is. It's like a bunch of big hills at the end, or at the beginning, and then at the end it's like a bunch of little airtime hills as it comes into the station.
Cool. Okay.
The only difference is this one was over 300 feet tall, where Magnum XL 200 is just over 200 feet. So this was a big deal. People were talking about this coaster like crazy. So they had a really good reputation at this time, so that's why like Kennywood is like, why don't we bring them in to do this project since Aerodynamics can't. So while a few fans lamented the changes, most people were happy to be gone, like get rid of Steel Phantom and try to do something new. The park president, Henninger, said the changes were not due to complaints about a rough ride. I think that is absolutely false. I think that is someone trying to trying to paint a better picture than what's actually going on.
Right.
You know, that's kind of, which, I mean, amusement parks do that all the time. Yeah. When we talked about Powder Keg in episode 1, same thing. Like, they just advertised it as a brand new ride, even though there were parts of it that were from the old ride. Right. So parks do that all the time. But I personally believe that they knew that it was a bad experience for a lot of people, so they wanted to change it. So I don't think it's the only reason they changed it, but I do think it definitely wasn't one of the reasons. So last rides for Steel Phantom were given on September 4th, 2000, and demolition and construction started soon after. Now I did want to show you, this is Steel Dragon 2000. That's the whole layout. It's really interesting. So I would love to ride this, but again, it's in Japan, so I have no idea. Maybe one day. So you can see here's some of the construction as they start to convert Steel Phantom into Phantom's Revenge. I thought this picture was really cool. All the coaster track just laid out in the parking lot like that. So one other thing I saw that was fascinating is this guy apparently got some of the old coaster trains from Steel Phantom.
How?
So
post?
So yeah, so he posted these pictures on. It wasn't even on Reddit because this is back in 2000. So it was just on like some forum. And from what I
Was it
read from,
MySpace?
it wasn't MySpace. It was, I don't know. It was some obscure. I didn't even know what it was. But basically, what he said is, we'll talk about this in a sec. But D.H. Morgan kind of changed the trains. They didn't. They used the same trains that Steel Phantom had, but they took the shells off and put brand new fiberglass shells on them. So you can see here, this is just the shell of the ride. There's no seats, there's no wheels, no chassis. It's just a shell of the coaster train.
I bet that could sell for a ton of money now.
Guess how much, according to him, guess how much they bought these for?
I would say maybe $100.
That's how much they got it for $100.
No way.
Isn't that insane? You could sell that for so much money, but
yeah.
I guess his story is they just called the park and asked if they could buy them, and apparently they called like right after they originally had like a buyer for them, and that deal fell through right as this guy called to ask to buy them.
He's
so
like
they were
a kid. That's so funny.
isn't that crazy? So they were just like, sure, we'll sell it to you.
Okay.
So that is if that's true, if that story is true, that is fascinating.
That's
that he's
really...
got a piece of history that important. So construction begins for Phantom's Revenge. They had a few hiccups due to weather, but ultimately the coaster did open in time for Memorial Day weekend as planned. The official opening day was set for May 20th. However, this is an interesting story. So there were park guests that were in the park on May 18th, just, right before Memorial Day weekend. Well, I guess not right before, but, they're just at the park for a normal day, and they see people on the new ride. They see people riding Phantom's Revenge. So all of a sudden, like, everyone from the park is just like darting swarming to Phantom's Revenge. And turns out they just were like, let's just put some people on it. So they just like started letting people ride it on May 18th. Wouldn't that be awesome? Like, you're just at a park and they're like, hey, you want to try this new ride? No one's rode it yet, or no one's ridden it yet. Like, that would be awesome. That would be so
really
cool.
Like, what if that happened to us if we went, like, when they opened, like, the Jolly Rancher riding first?
That's going to be open way before we get there.
But still, like, the thought of
it's a cool thought, though,
yes.
right? So,
yes.
So park guests, people riding the coaster, everyone flocks to the ride in, like, a huge line all day, obviously, whatever. So, anyway, after several months of construction and a fresh new paint job, Phantom's Revenge officially opened to the public on May 20th, 2001, and operates to this day. The ride experience is as follows. The first half of the ride remains almost identical. So riders board 28 passenger trains, rows of 2, 4 passengers per car. They ascend the 160-foot lift hill, plummet down the same first drop as before, hitting the straight track into the second hill. The difference starts here. The second drop is slightly steeper and slightly longer than it was before. So it was 225 feet, 80 miles per hour. Now it's 228 feet, 85 miles per hour. From here, the ride is quite different. They changed pretty much everything.
Right.
So the train then follows a massive, sweeping 270-degree upward bank turn before dropping and straightening out as it crosses over the first or the second drop. The track then banks to the right as it heads back up the hill through a tunnel that crosses under the Thunderbolt's support structure a second time. And you hit a powerful ejector airtime hill. The track banks to the right again as it reaches the top of the hill, hits 2 airtime hills, banks to the left, and then hits 2 more smaller airtime hills. The track follows a long bank turn to the right, and then jumps over 2 more airtime hills before running into the final brakes. Because of the coaster's interesting history, it's one of the few coasters that actually feature multiple manufacturers on the same ride. Because, like, aerodynamics, part of the ride is aerodynamics, part of it's the new D.H. Morgan. Yeah. The coaster, like the chassis that are on the ride are still aerodynamics, but the new restraints and new shells are D.H. Morgan. So,
that's so interesting.
Isn't that interesting? So even if you look on the Golden Ticket Awards, when it lists the manufacturer in one of the columns, it will literally say Aero/Morgan. So it's interesting. Not a lot of rides can say that, but that's this true. One can. The trains, like I said, the trains were mostly the same, other than they put a new shell on them. And one of the things that's really popular about the ride, which I know you like, is they got rid of the over-the-head restraints and
Yes.
replaced them with lap bars.
Those lap bars are insane.
They're
Let me tell
crazy.
you. I still have, I think it was my first time ever riding Phantom. I remember, like, I was little when I rode it. I remember being really small compared to the seat and the restraint. Like, I felt like the restraint was bigger than me. And so I was just, like, leaned over, clinging to the lap bar the entire ride. Like, just clinging onto it. So, anyways, but I love them now, and I think they're a lot of fun. And
Yeah, I don't know if Morgan's other rides have the same restraint system, but if you haven't been on Phantom's Revenge, rather than like a normal lap bar that kind of sits in front of you and you pull it down, these lap bars are on the side and you just kind of like pull it down from, like, if you're on the left side of the train, you pull it from left to right. So, and they provide, like, obviously you're very secure, it's very safe, but
right.
they provide lots of room for you to feel all of the airtime that
Which
the
is
ride
so
has.
fun.
Yeah, it's great. It's a lot of people, like, if you asked enthusiasts to make a list of their favorite restraints, like Phantom's Revenge is probably in their top 5.
Right.
So people love the restraints on that ride. So the ride has been applauded by enthusiasts and the general public as a vast improvement over the original Steel Phantom. It has people constantly say it's got a glossy, smooth ride, and it has a more enjoyable airtime finale. Thunderbolt remained closed during the opening months of the 2000 season, so they had to build, like I said, they had a tunnel that goes under Thunderbolt twice, once on the way down and once on the way up the hill. And the second time, they had to build kind of a tunnel that went under part of Thunderbolt's support structure. And because Thunderbolt at that point was, oh gosh, I guess it was 70 years old, something like that. Do I have it here? Yeah, 76 years old at that point when they built the ride. So they really just had to make sure that the old ride was like super secure and safe. Like, they didn't want to get to the point where they had to tear down one ride to build another. Like, that would have been pointless. So fortunately, they got it in a good spot, and like, it's open and still running to this day. So somehow Phantom's Revenge only ran one train for the 2001 season. So the first year that it was open, it only ran one train the whole year.
Yikes.
Oh my gosh.
That'd be a long line to wait through.
Every single time, like every day you're at the park, it would be a crazy long wait. I can't imagine that.
Yeah.
Like, that is just crazy. So I guess for some reason, D.H. Morgan didn't add they added magnetic brakes the next year so that the second train could operate. That seems like that shouldn't have happened. Like, they should have thought of that beforehand. Like, obviously it's not a problem now, but I can only imagine what the lines were like back in 2001 when it opened. That was crazy. So Skyrocket opened in 2010, but Phantom's Revenge continued to be the best, most popular ride in the park.
Right.
2019, Kennywood added their largest investment ever with Steel Curtain. The $20 million coaster now stands as the tallest in the park and features the highest inversion in the world on any coaster.
Ugh,
it's a corkscrew at 197 feet in the air. So, and and it also has the most inversions on any coaster in North America with 9. So
pull up.
You're not gonna go on Steel Curtain?
I don't know. Like, I really don't know at this point. Well, every time I see it in person, I'm like,
this is very intimidating.
Oh, it's so intimidating because you can see the entire ride.
Oh yeah, it's
like there's
nothing it's all out in the open. So
and so like, yikes! It's such a big coaster and it has so many inversions and it just looks absolutely nauseating. But it also looks like a lot of fun. So
we'll have to see how you do on some of the other looping coasters we go on this year.
I can agree with that. See how I do.
We'll try the motion sickness bands and the patches.
Yes,
and
we bought lots of motion sickness remedies to see if they would help you and I to feel better on some of these rides that are bigger and crazy and whatnot.
But yeah, though Steel Curtain is certainly a worthy contender for Best in the Park, Phantom continues to be the most popular ride in the park, and like we said earlier, it ranks higher in the Coaster Bot rankings. So, despite Steel Phantom's demise, there are remnants of the ride still at Kennywood to this day. So, if you go over to Thomastown, which is the park's little kiddie area, there's a small family ride there called Diesel Drivers. And if you look in the area in the middle of the ride, it's like meant to look like a scrapyard, and you can see there's little pieces of coaster track left over from Steel Phantom.
That's cool.
Isn't that cool?
That is cool.
So I think we talked about when we did our Powder Keg episode, like parks like paying tribute to old attractions and like being willing to not just brush them aside and forget about them, but to like actually remember them in their history. And so I think this is like a cool way for them to pay tribute to Steel Phantom, even though some people didn't like it as much as others.
Right.
Finally, just last year, Kennywood announced that Phantom would be getting a new paint job. The park let guests vote on 3 colors, keeping the same green color, or purple or blue. Ultimately, the winning color was purple, and over the off season, the ride was painted a brand new purple color for the 2022 season. And I think, there's pictures of it. It looks very good.
It's very...
The only thing I don't like is, so the coaster has 2 trains. It has a green one and a purple one.
Right.
So like here in this picture, you can see the purple one on the track there.
Just blends
it kind of blends in. So I kind of wish, if they're going to stick with the purple track, paint both of the trains green. That's what I would say. So that way it's, a little more contrast. But the purple does.
The point of the Phantom is to blend in. Maybe.
Oh, maybe that's what it is. So maybe they need
I don't know if that's the actual reason, but
you're just making up stories now.
Yep.
So.
Kennywood can back me up on that.
There you go.
So.
I also heard rumors, you can't see it in this picture as much. I saw it in another picture. I heard rumors that they're building a tunnel on this upper section of Thunderbolt. I'm kind of curious to see if that's true or not, but I heard rumors about that.
That'd be weird.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? I don't know why I don't know why they would do that, but so. All right, the one last thing we're going to talk about. So that's pretty much the history of Phantom's Revenge to this day. One thing that kept popping up over and over as I was doing research, though, is weddings on Phantom's Revenge and at Kennywood in particular. So these are multiple pictures I found of weddings happening. So this is on Jackrabbit, both of these, and then you can see this one's in the station for Phantom's Revenge. So from what I saw is Kennywood does anywhere from 2 to 6 weddings per year. And so they'll just like so you like schedule it and they'll close the ride down for like 30 minutes. And then you do like you can either do the ceremony in the station and then get on the ride and ride the coaster as like we're married celebration ride. Or you can get on the ride and then get married in the ride, and then as soon as you say I do, they like pull the button and you go.
Okay. Hold up. Kennywood and a wedding. That's not romantic at all. Like, it just...
Don't insult these people.
Okay. I get it. It has a romantic meaning behind like your story or whatever.
A lot of people, it's like they got married here because that's where they met, or that's where their first date was, or something.
Yes, I understand that, but it's like, and then I would compare it to Disney World, and it's just like the two, like Disney World has very like romantic places that you can go and get married at, and then get pictures in front of the castle, which it's like princessy and whatever.
We could just go get a picture in front of Noah's Ark.
Or Kenny the kangaroo.
Oh yeah, I do like that Kenny is in the train here, along with like. So I guess these are people from the wedding party. I think these two. That looks like a photographer. I think this guy may be taking this picture. I think is what it is. But yeah, and then Kenny Kangaroo just hanging out in the back of the train. I think that's really funny.
Is that grandpa that lost his hearing
aid? No, because that's on Jackrabbit. So.
Oh, okay. So he lost his hearing aid on the Jackrabbit too. Yeah, so that's funny.
But yeah, I saw this several times. I saw people like getting married on Phantom's Revenge.
Crazy.
So I just had to bring that up because I wanted to hear what your thoughts were on because it doesn't just happen at Kennywood. I've seen it at other parks too.
That's insane.
But Kennywood has made a like a big deal out of it, and so like I said, they have 2 to 6 per year.
2 to 6 per year. That's a lot.
Isn't that crazy?
That's so funny.
That's crazy.
I would not, like, I can't even picture, like, having a wedding in Kennywood, but to each their own, man.
Yeah,
so
it is what it is. So
I mean, go for it. So it just, yeah, that's so funny to me. I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
You could have as your reception food potato patch fries.
Oh, there you go. So you ride Phantom's Revenge, and then you have your reception over by Thunderbolt, and just everybody gets potato patch fries.
Potato patch fries.
There you go. I like that.
Perfect.
Maybe we can do that for like renewing our vows for our 10th anniversary or something.
Sure, honey.
You just see the face that he's giving me right now. Like, no.
That's never
No. Well, though the park will deny it, Steel Phantom was certainly a less than positive experience for everyone. But the park was able to breathe new life into the coaster and turn it into one of the best steel coasters in the world. And that is the history of Phantom's Revenge. So that was a lot of fun. Like I said, this coaster does have a special meaning in our family, I think.
Yes.
You know, it's like our first really big coaster together.
Yeah.
And like I said, the coaster that really got me into the enthusiast industry. So, it's a really great coaster. It personally is in my top 10. I know it's probably your favorite, but even out of all the other things I've ridden over the past several years, it's in my top 10, and I really enjoy it. I'm excited to try again as an enthusiast to see if
I was even thinking like the park has Thomas the Tank Engine, which our son loves Thomas right now, so it'd be fun to take him and have you and I ride some rides together again.
We're thinking about taking a trip to Kennywood over the summer.
We'll see.
We'll be in that area, but it'll just kind of depend on if we can save enough money to do so. So
we're going to a lot of them.
Yes, we're going to a lot of parks. So Kennywood's kind of the last priority, I think, out of all the parks, because we've been to it before.
Yes.
So we'll just have to see, but I'd love to make it if we can. So
yeah, me too.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning into this episode of Airtime Traveler. It's been a lot of fun to keep sharing these stories and to look into the history of all these coasters and find fun stuff like all the weddings that happen on Phantom's Revenge and the clowns riding Wildcat at Hershey Park. Like there's just lots of stories that I learn about doing this that even an enthusiast like myself, I don't know everything. So it's fun to learn all these things as I'm studying. So I think next time I'm actually going to do something from King's Dominion, because next time we record, we will have been to King's Dominion. So it'll be fresh in our minds. So I have an idea in mind of which one I want to do, but I'm not going to tell you because I want to be surprised.
I want to know the difference since I've never been.
You probably forget by the time we record anyway.
Probably.
So, but I'm excited. Like I said, we're going to be going there and just pretty soon here, and I'm excited to try it out, and then we'll do a Kings Island episode at some point too. We'll do something from there. So yeah, that'll be fun. Like we said at the beginning of the episode, be sure to follow us on Spotify so that you're notified whenever we drop a new episode, and you can continue to keep up to date with us, especially as pretty soon we're going to be dropping a few bonus episodes with these trip reports that we'll be doing. So we don't know when those will be dropping, so you stay notified so that you're aware when those happen. And you can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. It's just @Airtime Traveler, just like it sounds. And you can follow us there for more updates as well. So, any final words or final thoughts on Phantom's Revenge?
I just want to say, I'm really grateful that we have the listeners that we have thus far, and I'm really excited for it to grow. And I like sharing memories, not only of my own memories, but memories that I have with you, and continue to grow some memories together. So I think it'd be fun to keep doing this. And like Nathan said, please give us a like and a share, and we would love that a lot from our followers. And anyways, this has been fun, so I guess I'll hand it over to you to close us off.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, thank you everybody for tuning into this episode of Airtime Trevor, and we will see you in the next episode.